Chapter 1.
It is pleasant to finally be out of London and by the sea.
Miss Georgiana Darcy sighed, her gaze fixed upon the passing scenery outside the carriage. Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, the young lady's elder brother by some years, chuckled affectionately. "We have scarcely entered Ramsgate. Our lodgings are still 30 minutes away."
But can you not feel the change? Breathe the cleaner air, my dear brother, and taste the saltiness of the sea.
Georgiana grinned as Darcy complied. "Yes, there is a distinct lack of something in the air, is there not?" Indeed, the air smelled cleaner, one of the reasons Darcy preferred the country to town. He had planned this holiday by the sea after a particularly trying winter. Georgiana had fallen ill and nearly succumbed to fever in December. After a slow recovery that spring, which required his sister to remain at Pemberley rather than return to school, Georgiana was finally well. She was weak, however, and her usual vibrancy seemed dulled by the long convalescence. Their family physician had suggested a summer by the sea. Ramsgate was the obvious choice. After Darcy finished his yearly assessment of his aunt's estate, which was also located in Kent, he and Georgiana had departed for a summer by the sea. If he were honest, Georgiana was not the only one in need of a reprieve. The last year had been a sore trial. He had been plagued incessantly by letters from one Winston Hargrave, a tradesman of some fortune and reputation. The man wished for Pemberley's mining rights. Darcy knew his land had iron, but, like his ancestors before him, he wished to keep the land in an unaltered state. The natural beauty of his property would not be marred by extracting minerals from the ground. Hargrave's letters had grown increasingly insistent and desperate until Darcy had finally stopped replying. The letters had dwindled, and the last few had been cast into the fire unread. "I mean to enjoy myself this summer." Yes, he deserved it. And in the autumn he had promised his good friend Mr. Charles Bingley his help locating a suitable estate to lease. Bingley's fortune came from trade. Unlike Hargrave, however, his friend was a true gentleman. Darcy had nothing against tradesmen. In fact, he admired their mettle. It took an intrepid sort of man to make his fortune, especially when the world seemed determined to keep those not born to privilege from achieving greatness.
Will the house be in readiness?
Georgiana's words brought Darcy out of his musings and back to the present. "Mrs. Young came 2 weeks ago, so I imagine all will be prepared." Mrs. Young was Georgiana's companion. She had been in his employ for only a few months, but had already proved to be invaluable to Georgiana. She had impeccable references, and her connections had aided Darcy in finding a house to let in Ramsgate for the summer. "What shall we do first, Poppet?" Darcy smiled indulgently at his sister. Georgiana bounced with childlike enthusiasm. She was but 15, her 16th birthday being in August. It was hard to believe she only had a short time before she would come out in society.
"I wish to try sea bathing. Oh, my dear friend Miss Cromley says there is a delightful tea shop near the beach. Mrs. Peacock is the proprietor. She serves the most delicious ices and pastries."
"I see your sweet tooth has returned." That pleased Darcy. Georgiana had lost a stone while sick, too much on an already thin frame. "I will ensure we visit the tea shop daily." Perhaps then her round, rosy cheeks would return. The carriage came to a stop in front of an elegant house. The red door stood out, the others on the row were blue or green. There was a small garden in the front, and Darcy could see it extended around the back of the house. The carriage door opened, and Darcy stepped down, turning to assist his sister.
"Oh, it is very pretty."
Georgiana grinned as she looked up at the house. Darcy held out his arm, and Georgiana took it. Together they walked up the steps. The door opened before they reached it, and they were admitted. "Mr. Darcy, Miss Darcy, I am Smith, butler of Mill House." He bowed, and then proceeded to take their things. Mrs. Young has tea waiting in the parlour. If you like, the housekeeper, Mrs. Farr, can show you to your rooms to refresh yourselves." "That is agreeable." Darcy nodded at the man, pleased to see the staff was ready for their arrival. A tall, stout woman appeared. "Mrs. Farr, I presume?"
"Yes, sir, I am housekeeper here. Pray follow me, and I shall show you to your chambers." Darcy and Georgiana followed the lady, who by appearance seemed a congenial, motherly sort, though she also maintained an air of professional demeanour. He counted 12 stairs to the next floor and 4 doors before the matron stopped. "This is Miss Darcy's chamber. It overlooks the garden." The door opened, and Darcy peered in. The room was decorated in rose pink and sage green. The atmosphere was calming, and sunlight streamed through the open window. "It is delightful." Georgiana stepped inside, a bright smile on her face. "Your trunks will be brought up shortly, miss." Mrs. Farr stepped out and gestured. "This way, Mr. Darcy." 2 more doors down was Darcy's chamber. It was handsomely appointed, decorated in forest greens, blues, and cream. "Thank you, Mrs. Farr. This looks satisfactory." "Yes, sir. Shall I inform Mrs. Young you will join her in the drawing-room shortly?" "Yes, I shall wash off the road dust and be down with my sister. Has dinner been arranged?" Darcy had sent instructions with Mrs. Young, but wished to ascertain all was in order. "Indeed, sir. I understand we have prepared Miss Darcy's favourites for the evening." Mrs. Farr smiled. "Cook has been very industrious." "Very good. I thank you." The housekeeper departed, and Darcy stepped fully into his temporary bedchamber. His valet, Brisby, appeared, followed by 2 footmen carrying trunks. In short order, Brisby had his master in a fresh coat and ready to go downstairs. "See that everything is put away, will you, Brisby?" The man was more of an older and wiser friend than a valet. They had been together since Darcy was 12, and Darcy trusted him implicitly. "Yes, sir." Brisby turned to the trunks and immediately set to work. Darcy left his room, collected his sister at her door, and went downstairs for a restorative tea. "Everything seems to have been arranged, Mrs. Young. I commend you on your efficiency." Darcy sipped his second cup of tea. It was a delightful blend that tickled his senses. "Thank you, Mr. Darcy. I hope you both find the seashore to be exactly what you need." The lady smiled. Her dark eyes sparkled behind wire spectacles. Her hair had traces of grey mingled in with the brown, the curls visible peeking beneath her mob cap. "Miss Darcy wishes to try sea bathing. It will certainly be an adventure." Darcy smiled indulgently at his sister. "You are simply too proper to find enjoyment in frivolities, brother." Georgiana smirked impishly. "Tell me, have you already ascertained the location of a bookshop?" Darcy gasped, placing a hand on his chest. "How you wound me. To think that my first thought would be for a bookshop. Indeed, it was my second thought. The first was to find that tea shop you mentioned." Georgiana laughed, and Darcy joined her. They finished their tea and resolved to rest until dinner. Exploration could wait until the morrow. Darcy spent the rest of the afternoon engaged in a book he had brought with him from London. It was a charming story about 4 ladies who had been cast from their home after the patriarch passed. He was partway through and thoroughly despised the lady's sister-in-law, a miserly woman too full of herself and her belief in her own importance. She led her husband around by the nose, convincing him to break promises made on his father's deathbed. Georgiana wished to read it, and so Darcy sought to ascertain its acceptability for a young, impressionable lady. The eldest sister seemed to be a good example of ladylike behaviour, and the youngest was very young, not someone his sister would emulate. But the middle sister, Marianne, seemed to be foolishly romantic, lacking the sense her sister possessed in spades. Georgiana would know better, he mused, as he read of how the young Marianne ignored all sense of propriety and threw herself at the man called Willoughby. He felt certain that the future boded ill for the pair. At length it was time to dress for dinner.
He and Georgiana ate in a small dining room. Mrs. Young pleaded fatigue and took a tray in her room, leaving brother and sister to themselves. It was a lovely evening, and after a short time in each other's company after the meal, both Mr. and Miss Darcy retired, eager to begin their explorations the next day. They departed Mill House shortly after breakfast. It was a brief walk to the tea shop, and Darcy eschewed the carriage in hopes of enjoying the fresh air with his sister. Georgiana remarked on the shops they passed, expressing a desire to browse the wares when they had a chance.
"There is your bookshop, brother."
Georgiana pointed at a lovely storefront. A sign that said Hogarth's Library hung over the door. "That is one of the circulating libraries in Ramsgate, dearest. The general stationer's is located further down. But I shall be sure to visit Hogarth's shop as soon as may be. Look, there is Mrs. Peacock's tea shop." The tea shop was located on a corner within sight of the shore. Windows wrapped around two sides of the shop. Darcy could see tables arranged inside and a counter where lovely pastries were displayed. They entered and took a small table near the window. At length a young woman came taking their order. Brother and sister waited patiently, watching the people around them. While the wait was longer than Darcy was used to, he was not disappointed when he tasted his lemon pastry and vanilla ice. "This is excellent." Darcy suppressed a moan of pleasure. "How do you find your raspberry tart?"
"It is everything my friend described. Oh, tell me we can come every day, brother."
Georgiana turned her pleading gaze to him. "If that is what you desire, dearest, I shall not complain." They enjoyed the rest of their treat and then departed, intending to walk on the beach before returning home. The morning air carried the briny freshness of the sea, stirred by a steady breeze that lifted the edges of cloaks and set the ribbons of bonnets fluttering. The tide had withdrawn only a little while earlier, leaving behind long stretches of damp sand that gleamed in the pale sunlight. Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries sharp and cheerful, while the rhythmic hush of the waves formed a gentle accompaniment to the promenade of visitors who had come down to the shore for exercise and diversion. Darcy walked beside his sister with calculated ease, his hands clasped loosely behind his back as he listened to Georgiana's light conversation. Ramsgate had proved agreeable thus far, and the morning's air seemed to have restored some of the animation that had lately deserted her spirits. She had spoken more in the last quarter hour than she had in an entire afternoon the previous week, and he found the change most gratifying. The waves beat gently against the sandy shore, and Georgiana stopped to pick up a shell. She turned to show Darcy when a great brindle-coloured dog charged them, a stick in his mouth. Darcy stepped in front of his sister, hoping to stop the beast from ploughing her over, only to be knocked on his back by the giant animal. The impact drove the breath from his lungs, and for a time he lay sprawled upon the sand, staring upward at the pale sky, while grains of sand worked their way most unpleasantly into his coat and cravat.
"Bruno! Naughty dog, shame on you!"
A young lady rushed to his side, wrapping her hands around the dog's collar and pulling.
"I'm so sorry, sir. Bruno is still a puppy. He is not fully trained. I'm afraid I removed his lead so he could play fetch, but rather than return to me with his stick, he came after you."
Darcy pushed himself upright, brushing sand from his sleeve, while the enormous animal proceeded to wag his tail with shameless enthusiasm. The dog appeared quite pleased with the encounter, though Darcy could not claim the same satisfaction. Darcy stood, brushing sand off his coat and breeches. He looked up, intending to chastise the young lady, only to be rendered silent. The lady before him was stunning. She was petite, with a light and pleasing figure. Her bonnet had fallen back, revealing dark, curly hair. There were glints of red in the locks that shone as she turned her head. Her gaze was filled with remorse, and Darcy thought he had never seen such fine eyes in his life. They were the colour of hot chocolate and sparkling with intelligence. He could very well drown in their depths. Her breath came quickly from her dash across the sand, and a faint flush coloured her cheeks as she struggled to restrain the still wiggling animal. The effort had drawn a few loose curls about her temples, giving her a dishevelled appearance that was, paradoxically, most becoming. Rather than scold, he bowed. "Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, at your service. This is my sister, Miss Georgiana Darcy."
The lady dropped a curtsy. "Miss Elizabeth Bennet, sir. And this brute is Bruno."
She gestured to the dog, who finally lay in the sand, chewing happily on his stick. As if to demonstrate his utter innocence, Bruno rolled onto his side and thumped his tail against the sand with enthusiastic vigour.
"A Great Dane?" Georgiana stepped forward. "I've never seen one in person. You say he is a puppy? How big will he become?"
Her voice held both curiosity and delight, and she regarded the animal with fascination rather than fear. Believe it or not, he was the runt of his litter, though he has outgrown all his brothers and sisters. Bruno will be the size of a small pony someday. Miss Bennet grinned. "He was a gift from my uncle. My mother was scandalized at first, but was convinced such a large animal would keep any thieves and miscreants from invading my father's house." Georgiana giggled, and Darcy, too, chuckled at the amusing anecdote. "He seems to be rather ferocious, until he is not." Miss Bennet agreed. "An accurate assessment, Mr. Darcy." At that moment, Bruno lifted his head and trotted several paces away, only to return again with the same stick, dropping it proudly at Miss Bennet's feet.
"Oh, there are my aunt and uncle."
"Will you not introduce us?" The words burst from Darcy's lips before he had even considered them. All he knew was that he wished to know more of Miss Bennet, and if an introduction to her relations accomplished that, then so be it. Miss Bennet regarded him with mild surprise, though not displeasure. "If you like." Miss Bennet raised a hand and waved her relations over. A handsomely dressed couple approached. The lady looked to be only a few years older than Darcy. Her husband seemed older, perhaps nearing his 40th year. They walked with the easy composure of those accustomed to society, and the gentleman's expression carried a warmth that suggested good humour rather than formality.
"Aunt, uncle, Mr. and Miss Darcy have requested an introduction. Mr. Darcy, Miss Darcy, my relations, Mr. Edward Gardner and his wife, Mrs. Madeline Gardner."
They exchanged greetings and proposed moving to the shade nearby. Miss Bennet tugged on her unruly beast, and together they meandered over to a nearby bench positioned beneath a large tree. The shade provided welcome relief from the strengthening sun. From their vantage, the curve of the bay stretched gracefully along the horizon, dotted with small boats that bobbed gently upon the water.
"Darcy, you say?" Mrs. Gardner asked. "I hail from Lambton. Are you any relation to the Darcys of Pemberley?" "The very ones." Georgiana beamed. "My brother is master of that estate." "How very coincidental. I met your mother in passing, such a kind, elegant lady." Mrs. Gardner smiled kindly. "You look very like her." This pleased Georgiana, and the two fell into discussion. Mr. Gardner, in turn, exchanged pleasant conversation with Darcy and Miss Bennet. Darcy learned the couple had come to Ramsgate on holiday, bringing their niece along. "I have 5 nieces, sir. We often invite 1 or 2 along with us when we travel about. My brother by marriage does not like to travel and prefers to stay at his estate. Last year we took Lizzie's elder sister Jane. Next year we shall take Mary, the 3rd in line." 5 daughters, I can scarcely imagine. Darcy glanced at Georgiana. It was all he could do to care for 1 sister. "Yes, it is a shame, according to my mother." Miss Bennet raised a brow. "I shall now disregard all propriety, sir, and tell you that my father's estate is entailed to a distant cousin. Having 5 daughters of whom she must dispose has vexed my poor mother's nerves for years."
Her tone held a note of dry amusement that did not escape Darcy's notice. He found himself smiling in spite of the frankness of the remark. Darcy sympathized. Pemberley was not entailed. The estate was a fee simple. It could be left to whomever he wished. Until he married, his will stipulated that everything would go to Georgiana upon an untimely death, though he hoped that would never be the case. The conversation flowed easily thereafter. Mr. Gardiner spoke of the fishing along the coast and the bustle of London trade, while Miss Bennet listened with lively interest, occasionally offering observations that revealed both wit and intelligence. Georgiana, for her part, had grown thoroughly charmed by Mrs. Gardiner's gentle manner. Meanwhile, Bruno stretched himself upon the sand at Miss Bennet's feet, gnawing contentedly upon his stick, his attitude reflecting his opinion that the entire morning's adventure had been arranged solely for his entertainment. They spoke for another half-hour before the Gardiners needed to depart. Eager to be in their company again, Darcy exchanged cards with Mr. Gardiner. "I shall send around an invitation," he said, bowing to the ladies. "That would be most enjoyable. We have yet to make friends in Ramsgate, and I am certain Elizabeth would enjoy spending time with Miss Darcy." Miss Bennet inclined her head with a smile. Darcy could see genuine pleasure in her countenance, and granted her a grin in return. They parted ways, and Darcy could feel Georgiana's excitement in the way his sister gripped his arm.
"Such charming people. When shall we invite them to dine, brother?"
"As soon as may be, dear one." He cast a brief glance back toward the retreating figures along the shore. Miss Bennet had paused to throw a stick once more, and Bruno bounded after it with joyful abandon. Yes, soon. Darcy could scarcely wait to see the beguiling Miss Bennet again.